I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. I'm filming this like a couple weeks ahead, but by the time you're seeing this, I should have 2 exciting new pieces up on Groovy Music Club. A Nico discography overview and a Geese discography overview. I got that one up just in time for their appearance on SNL. Hello! Abby from like a week in the future. I am here from the far future to tell you of the not so distant future that the Dolls Pod has returned for season 3 with a very special guest, Jennifer Juniper herself, Jenny Boyd. Emma got the Jenny Boyd for an interview for our first episode of season 3. Genuinely bonkers. And we had such a great conversation about London in the 60s, San Francisco in the summer of love, the Beatles in India, on the road with Fleetwood Mac in the 70s, and starting her whole life over in her late 30s and getting her freaking doctorate. And she wrote 2 Fleetwood Mac songs as if she needed to be any cooler. Jenny is an amazing woman with an amazing story, and you do not want to miss this first episode back. The Dolls Pod Season 3 premiere is available wherever you listen to your podcasts, and thank you, Emma, for setting up this amazing interview for us. Alright, back to the regularly scheduled episode. Future Abby out! This week's episode was supposed to be my first of 2026. It literally never works out that way. But this artist's entry into the Vinyl Monday canon has been much anticipated and is honestly long overdue. This week's album is Leonard Cohen, Songs of Leonard Cohen. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post the hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls, you can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written version of this review on my website. Also linked in the description with those 2 new Groovy Music Club pieces. Alright, let's take the plastic off. So my copy is an early repress from sometime in 1968. It could also be an original depending on when the actual release date of this album was. We'll get into this later. Let's talk about this cover art. While the cover was designed by John Berg, the actual cover photo was taken by Leonard Cohen himself. Sort of, because the photo was taken in a subway station photo booth. That's why you see the cover photo by machine credit, because technically it was taken by the machine. As for the back cover, having only ever previously streamed this album, I'd never seen this until I bought a physical copy, and what a back cover it is. Being the art historian in the room, I figured she's probably a religious icon. Makes sense. Religion comes up in Leonard's writing almost as much as women do, and I figured she was probably from Catholicism. They sure do love their naked ladies and fire. Sure enough, she is both. Her name is Anima Sola, Lonely Soul. She's popular in Latin America, where she's also called, I can't roll my R's, so I know this is not gonna come out right. Shout out speech impediment girlies. Animas del Purgatorio. Soul in purgatory, wearing the chains to her fate. This looks more like traditional depictions of hell to me, but hey, I guess there's no hell like limbo. Sadly, we don't yet know the artist of this Anima Sola. Leonard found her at a magic shop he frequented outside the Chelsea Hotel. On Songs of Leonard Cohen, we of course have the man of the hour, the introduction of the man of the hour on this channel and to the music industry, on lead vocals and guitar, and our principal lyricist.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Leonard Cohen.
He's joined by Willie Ruff playing bass on So Long Marianne, Jimmy Loveless playing drums on So Long Marianne, Nancy Pretty on backing vocals, and the band Kaleidoscope. Now this is where it gets a little tricky because Columbia Records didn't bother to write anything down, so from my research, this is the best we can get. Chris Darrow plays bass on So Long Marianne and Teachers, as well as mandolin. Solomon Felthouse plays various Middle Eastern instruments. David Lindley likely plays the fiddle we hear on So Long Marianne, and Chester Krill plays mouth harp on Hey That's No Way to Say Goodbye, and fiddle on So Long Marianne with David. Songs of Leonard Cohen was produced by John Hammond and John Simon, mixed by Leonard Cohen. Roll transition. Anthony DeCurtis said, if Leonard had recorded just this one compelling album and disappeared, his stature as one of the most gifted songwriters of our time would still stand. But good God, this album did not come easy! There are several accounts of when and how Cohen first heard the call to songwriting, and most of them came from Leonard. He said he overheard the couple in the room next to him having sex while he was, with his own lady friend, and synced his words to their moaning to make said lady friend laugh. Author Lael Leibowitz says Cohen was profoundly inspired by Bob Dylan, and biographer Sylvie Simmons places the shift either at or around the time of the critical failure of Leonard's third book, Beautiful Losers. He tried to sell the film rights to The Favorite Game as well. That didn't work. Plain and simple, Leonard needed the money. Quote, I could live in Greece for $1,100 a year, but I couldn't pay my grocery bill. I always played the guitar and sang, so it was an economic solution to the problem of making a living and being a writer. Through his whole life, Leonard would take months or even years to write one song. His creative process was not automatic or immediate. He would write an onslaught of verses and periodically edit the song down to what it was really about. He said sometimes the song would go off on a tangent and you'll have perfectly respectable verses, but that have led you away from the original feel of the song, so it's a matter of coming back. It's a very painful process because you have to throw away a lot of good stuff to come back and to get those 3 verses of Suzanne. That took me quite a long time. On a trip back to Montreal in the early 1960s, he met avant-garde dancer and wife of artist Armand Vaillancourt, Suzanne Verdal. Friend Erica Pomerantz described Suzanne as, quote, cool and creative and one of the beautiful people, an icon to dance like Leonard was to the poetry and art set. In the fall of 1966, Leonard finally pulls the trigger, deciding to set out as a musician. He arrives in New York, but it's only meant as a pit stop. He intended to go to Nashville to become a country music singer. Yeah, Leonard was a huge fan of country music, listened to country radio all the time on Hydra, and he was in something of a country band back in high school. Reluctant to rent or put down roots in New York, he instead stays at various hotels, the most famous being the Chelsea. 1966 was a crazy year in pop culture to begin with. John Savage wrote a whole book saying as much. New York was no different. That summer, at the peak of his career, Bob Dylan gets in a motorcycle accident. He takes a year away from public life, the Hawks, the band, the basement tapes, music from Big Pink, blah blah blah. We covered all that last summer. This creates the space for raga rock, baroque pop, and psych rock to happen. The Summer of Love, which Dylan has effectively benched himself for. Harvey Kubernik correctly identified that pop culture abhors a vacuum. The market for inscrutably neurotic Jewish singer-songwriters with an unconventional vocal style had now been established. The position required a unique set of talents, a disarming blend of arrogance and innocence, a keen intelligence demanding as much from the audience as from the artist, and an intoxicating otherness that conveyed something of the exotic, the erotic, and the romantic. Though the Velvet Underground and their own inscrutably neurotic and Jewish frontman Lou Reed had begun their reign with Warhol's Factory, Kubernik's description sounds a lot more like Al Cohen to me. Leonard found this New York hostile. Quote, it seemed a terribly messy, filthy place, but I was game. I went into one coffee shop after another and felt frozen out, just like in Montreal. He was constantly turned down by agents for being too old or his songs too sad, but there was a place for him. If not for the efforts of two women, Leonard may never have found that place. His first manager, Mary Martin, moved mountains for him. She loaned him her bathroom to record his demos in, formed a publishing company for him, and knowing she was looking for songs to record for her new album, Mary gave Leonard Judy Collins's number. Judy chose to record Dress Rehearsal Rag for how it resonated with her own personal experiences. She'd struggled with suicidal ideation in the past. The second she chose to record, a little more radio-friendly than the first, became a hit when In My Life went gold. Folk audiences were now aware of Suzanne and Leonard's brilliance. But Mary's work wasn't done just yet. She had her sights set on Bob Dylan's label, Columbia Records. And their A&R guy, John Hammond. Every chance she got, she talked up Leonard to John. But she confessed, quote, "He plays pretty good guitar and he's a wonderful singer, but he doesn't read music and he's sort of very strange. I don't think Columbia would be at all interested in him. But you might be." She sent him Leonard's books, personally delivered his demos, and finally set up a lunch. Leonard played him 4 songs that would wind up on his first LP. Suzanne, Master Song, The Stranger Song, and Hey That's No Way to Say Goodbye. Quote, "I thought he was enchanting," because that's the only word you can use. He was not like anything I've ever heard before. I just feel that I always want a true original if I can find one, because there are not many in the world. And the young man set his own rules, and he was really a first-class poet, which is most important. But at 32, Columbia worried Leonard was too old. In pop music in the 1960s, 32 is ancient. So Hammond and Leonard appeal to Columbia's new kid on the block, Clive Davis. This guy goes on to be a legend in his own right, discovering Laura Nyro, Janis Joplin, Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, and Patti Smith. With Clive's help, Leonard lands his contract with Columbia in April of 1967. That same month, Judy Collins does a Joan Baez Dylan thing and invites Leonard on stage with her to sing Suzanne. He'd been performing his poetry at universities for years. He was really comfortable in that context. But with all these people looking at him, expecting some new Messiah to come along, some new Bob Dylan, after only about 4 lines, he got stage fright and walked off. Judy brought him back to finish the song later, and the audience was really polite and nice about it, but this anxiety does come back down the line. As Elle has deferred his plans to return to Hydra and write another book for this whole music thing, he sends for his partner Marianne and her son to come join him in New York. But while Marianne wasn't around, Leonard romanced, or attempted to romance, 2 other blondes we have covered extensively on this series. First he tried for then chanteuse of the Velvet Underground, Nico. But she curved him. She planned to record his song, The Jewels on Your Shoulder. Leonard wrote Take This Longing, Joan of Arc, and One of Us Cannot Be Wrong about her. He had a little more success with another young lady, a fellow Canadian, striking it out on her own for the first time since her divorce. Joni Mitchell bounced back and forth between New York and LA for the past year or so, trying to make a name for herself as she recorded her first album. The two formally met at the 1967 Newport Folk Fest. He wrote Winter Lady about her. In May of 1967, production on Songs of Leonard Cohen began. Bob Johnston was originally assigned as producer, but he had his hands full with Dylan out in Nashville and the planning stages of this live album Johnny Cash wanted to do. Columbia's second choice was John Hammond himself. They set up in Columbia Studio E, then Studio B, with a handful of still uncredited Columbia session musicians. They set the mood with candles, incense, and a mirror, just like Leonard's room at the Chelsea. Quote, "Those takes were lively, but I kept listening to what the musicians were doing. It was the first time I had ever played with a really accomplished band, and I was somewhat intimidated. I really didn't know how to sing with really good professional musicians that were really cooking, and I would tend to listen to the musicians rather than concentrate on what I was doing. because they were doing it so much more proficiently than I was. Marianne's visit came, and it was arranged for her to stay in an apartment separate from Leonard. At a certain point, it became clear to all involved that he didn't really want her to move to New York to be with him, so he rewrites his song Come On, Marianne to So Long, Marianne. The operation moves again to Studio C, an old Greek Orthodox church prized for its acoustics, but John Hammond either gets sick or has other projects to work on and puts off recording for 4 weeks. Leonard argues against this. He thinks it's taken long enough, so Columbia throws in their third guy, John Simon. Leonard wasn't happy with how bare his recording sounded, even with Hammond's guys. Simon believed that Cohen's sparse, somber songs needed sweetening. Cohen wanted more, but he didn't want sweetening, and he didn't have the music studio vocabulary to convey this. This led to such antics as Simon trying to put drums and piano on Suzanne, a weird stop-start thing on So Long Marianne, and wheeling a hurdy-gurdy into the room for Sisters of Mercy. I can practically hear Leonard's eyes rolling. Noel Harrison makes Suzanne a hit. Meanwhile, Leonard's getting frustrated. All 19 takes of his own song have been bust. In this time that it's taken for Leonard to get one album together, Judy releases another with her recordings of Priests, Sisters of Mercy, and Hey That's No Way to Say Goodbye, and her recording of Both Sides Now. Speaking of former flames, Leonard attends a Nico show at the Scene Club. Now, a few biographers have said this was to promote her album Chelsea Girls, and that's not wrong, but it's also not right. If you'll remember from our Nico episode, she had just spent 3 months out in LA shaping her whole new look, persona, and sound, so in reality, this show at the Scene was to debut the new Nico. Now, I forgot to mention this detail, but LA band Kaleidoscope opened for her at this gig. Leonard liked their sound and brought them in for a session. They play on So Long Marianne, Hey That's No Way to Say Goodbye, Song of the Streets, Teachers, and others. There are conflicting reports on whether or not they'd actually gotten to rehearse before this session. Simmons's text says no, but Chester Krill remembers them getting to do so. Chester also remembers Simon at the helm, but Simmons and Leibowitz point out that Simon had given up and gone on vacation, and now there was too much extra stuff on this record. Oh, brother! So while Simon was on give-up vacation, Leonard mixed the album himself. Quote, removing Simon's sweetening from the 4-track master tape, quote within a quote, was like trying to take the sugar back out of the coffee. In a lot of cases, he just couldn't do it, so he shoved it way in the back of the mix. It's never come easily. I've never been particularly confident about the process, and I was never able to get exactly what I wanted. I always had that sense, if I can just finish the damn thing. And you keep notching your standards down, degree by degree, until finally you say, I've finished. Never mind. The track listing of Songs of Leonard Cohen goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Suzanne, followed by Master Song, then Winter Lady, next The Stranger Song, and side 1 closes with Sisters of Mercy. Opening up side 2, we have So Long Marianne, followed by Hey That's No Way to Say Goodbye, Stories of the Street, then Teachers, and the album closes with One of Us Cannot Be Wrong. Songs of Leonard Cohen was released sometime in either late December 1967 or early 1968. This was for sure released in Europe in February. It was the first of his Songs trilogy, with follow-up Songs from a Room and Songs of Love and Hate. Leonard had profiles in the New York Times, Playboy magazine, one written by Buffy St. Marie for Folky Mag Sing Out. And Carl Dallas writes a particularly revealing profile for The Melody Maker, in line with Songs of Leonard Cohen doing much better in the UK than it did in the US. Much Much better. Leonard asserts that he will make it out to Nashville eventually, and New York was just a side quest. Quote, "I never wanted to make that scene. I never thought of myself as a poet with a capital P. Instead, I want to write the sort of songs you hear on a car radio. I don't want anyone to say, 'My God, that music's great.' I want to write lyrics that no one notices, but they find themselves singing over a few days later without remembering where they heard them. All in all, I just want to make songs for people, because I reckon they can understand the things I understand." Carl agreed. If Cohen really means what he says, and he has a habit of using words like religious, God, prostitute, and sin with meanings quite special to himself, so it's not always easy to tell if he's putting you on or leading you on, no one could accuse him of underestimating his audiences. He correctly predicted, when Leonard Cohen's debut album is issued, I predict the talk will become deafening. The hype was so great that there was a planned film adaptation of Suzanne with Leonard and Joni Mitchell collaborating on the score. But the project fell through, and the romance didn't last. It seems Joni fell way harder for Leonard than he did her. Chelsea Morning, I Don't Know Where I Stand, The Gallery, Rainy Night House, A Case of You, and The Last Time I Saw Richard are all about Leonard. That song about the Midway is also in the conversation, but let's be so real, that one is definitely about David Crosby. They did say pretty similar things about being her muse. Cros confessed to Howard Stern that it was, quote, emasculating being with a woman as talented as Joni. Leonard said he didn't like living with Beethoven. He had a fling with fellow Chelsea denizen Janis Joplin. She sucked his dick, then turned him down, saying she preferred handsome men. He wrote a whole song about it. Speaking of San Francisco, Suzanne Verdal had relocated from Montreal after splitting with Armand, and along the way, she heard about this song that her acquaintance wrote for her. How did Suzanne herself feel about Suzanne? A little weird at first. In an interview in 1998, she said she was flattered somewhat, but I was depicted as sad, and that's a little unfortunate. You know, I don't think I was quite as sad as that, albeit maybe I was, and he perceived that and I didn't. Suzanne has been covered over and over and over again. Nick Cave performed it, but I honestly don't like that one. I'm Your Man is much better suited to Nick's talents and persona and weirdly large forehead. I don't know where I was going with that. My favorite Suzanne cover is by Françoise Hardy. I put her cover in quotes because looking at the lyric, it was rewritten to sound better in French. I don't know French, but I know damn well Une flamme brûlée dans ton cœur does not translate to for she's touched your perfect body with her mind. As for Marianne, though their romance wasn't to be, their love persisted right up until the very end. Leonard still loved her. About the album, Chester Krill said, quote, I remember being very polite about it all and grateful for the opportunity and the work, but thinking what a train record of a record it was. Train record? Freudian slip of the fucking century right there. But thinking what a train wreck of a record it was, and what a spectacular mess for someone to try and start their career with. It reminded me of the excesses of Tiny Tim's first album, which seemed a more fitting place for them to occur. Al Cohen himself flip-flopped on how he felt. In 1976, he said, I felt there were some eccentricities in John Simon's arrangements that I objected to. That very same year, he also said, John Simon was great and much better than I understood at the time. Later, Simon wrote some delightful arrangements, like the one to Sisters of Mercy, still based around my guitar playing. I wanted women's voices, and he came up with some nice choirs of women. We did have a falling out over Suzanne. Another falling out was So Long, Marianne. But I do think he's a really fine producer, and he did bring the project to completion. As my friend Leon Wieselder said, it has the delicious quality of doneness. So, what do I think of Songs of Leonard Cohen? Lots of critics of this album deride the horns, strings, percussion, piano, flutes, accordion, and all sorts. Because they're superfluous, they distract from Leonard's writing, playing, and voice. I don't think so. Firstly, it's hard to distract from Leonard's playing. It's not the playing of a rock and roller or a folkie. He's playing classical guitar, which, while light, I feel it can stand up to having a lot of stuff on top of it. Maybe it's just my taste. I do like Astral Weeks and Brighter Later, both albums' productions influenced by the production on Songs of Leonard Cohen. I do think Bob Johnston did a better job overall with Songs of Love and Hate, but Hammond and Simon's extras help flesh out Leonard's stories. I also hear people complaining about the amateurish quality of the female vocals. Firstly, you need an ingenue to stand up to the old, world-weary poet. It works on film, and it works on record. And secondly, of course it's gonna sound amateurish. Nancy Pretty wasn't a singer. She was John Simon's girlfriend. With this track-by-track breakdown, I intend to examine how Leonard writes his muses, whether he's talking about a real woman or a god, and what that reveals about himself. About Songs of Leonard Cohen's magical opener, he said, "Everything happened just as it was put down. She was the wife of a man I knew. Her hospitality was immaculate." I believe this is only the third time I've done this on my channel. I did it once with Barstool Blues, again with I'll Be Your Mirror. Let's go for it a third time, a line-by-line analysis of Suzanne. I am totally gonna sound like Madeline Ford doing this, but I literally do not care. This is a wonderful song. Suzanne takes you down to her place near the river. You can hear the boats go by. You can spend the night beside her. This introduces us to the real Suzanne, Suzanne Verdal, and her charming little apartment on the bank of the St. Lawrence River in Montreal. And you know that she's half crazy, but that's why you want to be there. Though she's eccentric, she's aspirational. She charms with her free spirit. And she feeds you tea and oranges that come all the way from China. She did like Constant Comment tea, but the oranges weren't quite all the way from China. She would go down to Chinatown to pick up mandarin oranges. And just when you mean to tell her that you have no love to give her, then she gets you on her wavelength. "We were definitely on the same wavelength," she said. "We could almost hear each other think at times, and that was such a delight to us. I sensed a deep, philosophical side to Leonard that he seemed to see in me as well, and he got a kick out of it." And she lets the river answer that you've always been her lover. And you want to travel with her, and you want to travel blind, and you know that she will trust you, for she's touched your perfect body with her mind. Suzanne has clarified on her blog and in several interviews that though Leonard was interested in pursuing her, she turned him down. "Leonard Cohen and I were lovers in a rarefied soul connection, not as lovers of the flesh." Second verse. "For Jesus was a sailor when he walked upon the water, and he spent a long time watching from his lonely wooden tower. As the Son of God, and Mary, human, Jesus is half man, half divine." This line of the song is his divine side. This line is his human side. "And when he knew for certain only drowning men could see him, he said, 'All men shall be sailors then.'" People come to Jesus, quite literally in this sense, when they're in times of crisis. Jesus's human half allows him to be the conduit between us and his Father. Lots of religions have these in-between figures. I think of the bodhisattvas, who put off their own nirvana to help us all achieve it too. Leonard was Jewish, but he saw this connective tissue between all religions, and I think that's beautiful. "But he himself was broken long before the sky would open, forsaken, almost human. He sank beneath your wisdom like a stone. His broken body, the sky opening, forsaken, almost human, all invokes the passion." If you interpret this story similarly to how I do, then at this moment, right before Jesus' death, he was the most human he had been since his birth. And even at his birth, there is this tone that he is doomed. You hear it in a lot of these traditional Christmas songs. And you want to travel with him, and you want to travel blind, and then you think maybe you'll trust him, as he's touched your perfect body with his mind. I don't pretend to have all the answers when it comes to the God stuff. I did not grow up in the church. I do believe in something, but it's more in the sense that humans have this innate instinct to believe in some greater thing that we can't see. Whether it's a god, rock and roll, yourself, or the power of a muse. Now Suzanne takes your hand and she leads you to the river. She is wearing rags and feathers from Salvation Army counters. We're back to the real Suzanne, who loved taking walks along the river and wearing her rags and feathers. And the sun pours down like honey on Our Lady of the Harbor. Our Lady of the Harbor is the statue at Notre-Dame de Bon Secours in Montreal. Leonard is setting the scene with more religious imagery. Temples, churches, chapels are places we go to be in God's space. We go there to hear his word and pray to him, and we've been doing this for thousands of years since there were multiple gods we worshipped. And she shows you where to look among the garbage and the flowers. There are heroes in the seaweed, there are children in the morning, they're leaning out for love, and they will lean that way forever, while Suzanne holds the mirror. She opens him up to the beauty in everything, and the muse allows the artist to see himself. Sylvie Simmons said, quote, "Leonard the poet transformed the physical Suzanne into the metaphysical Suzanne and made her an angel. Leonard the magician sawed her down the middle, then put the two parts back together, the carnal and the spiritual, and made her more perfect than before." Our narrator has found safety in his muse, salvation even, answers to questions he didn't know he was asking, not unlike having a faith in a god. There's divinity in Suzanne's quirks, her humanity, as Christ was divine and human. That's the genius of Suzanne. As far as the music goes, this is a perfect balance of Leonard and his accoutrements. The finger-picked guitars, choir soaked in reverb, and strings, they all create the texture of the surface of the water sparkling in the sunlight. Master Song introduces Leonard's carnal half, the anxious, unsettled Leonard. He was the man who took flight just as much as he was the romantic living on the water. Leonard's best efforts to remove a lot of these extras create a stark sonic landscape for his paranoid words of a prisoner trying to ply his captor into a crisis of faith. The Western electric guitar strums, organ popping in, an effort to strip the horn stabs, just make them stand out instead. It's one of my favorite things on the album, and again, does a really great job at telling this story. Your eyes are wild, and your knuckles are red, and you're speaking far too low. The image of a come-to-Jesus crisis. Our captor is compelled to pilgrimage. Your master took you traveling to a temple where they take your clothes at the door. He's handed the evidence of original sin, the apple core. Our narrator is a prisoner of his own mind, or perhaps the Eucharist, the repeated use of the line, wine and bread. Leonard himself said this song was about the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, the narrator, the master, and the captor. Who is up to you. I've seen a lot of different interpretations online, and I don't think I agree with any of them. And you will kneel beside his bed that we polished so long ago, before your master chose instead to make my bed of snow. To me, the bed of snow invokes the birth of Christ, not long after the winter solstice. Master Song presents one hell of a version of the story of the Trinity. Is Jesus taunting the Holy Ghost? It's cryptic and hard to verbalize, like one's own relationship with the idea of a god. Maybe we might not have a 100% grasp on the words, we do on the tension and edginess in the music. Joni Mitchell has two amazing sleeper songs on two amazing records, Lady of the Island on Crosby, Stills and Nash, and Winter Lady here. The Traveling Lady very much applies to Joni. She drifted between New York, LA, and very briefly Florida, where she met David Crosby. The two sides of her first album, Song to a Seagull, are titled I Came to the City and Out of the City and Down to the Seaside. I'm Just a station on your way, I know I'm not your lover. Also very true to the woman who authored Urge for Going. Her whole first album really is about that early 20s struggle between falling in love and wanting your own freedom. Leonard's lyrics compare this winter lady to another child of snow he once knew. She used to wear her hair like you, except when she was sleeping, and then she'd weave it on a loom of smoke and gold and breathing. Put a pin in this lyric for later. This arrangement also reminds me of Joni's first album. Cross wanted it to feel like she was singing live, so he kept the extras to a bare minimum. He also didn't really know how to produce, so there's hella reverb and mic peaking all over the place. Though Song to a Seagull was released, I believe 4 months after Songs of Leonard Cohen, Winter Lady invokes that feeling of seeing Joni in the round. A gently picked, echoing guitar duet with a sweet songbird flute. Leonard would not be the last one to musically compare her to a bird.
Seagulls circle endlessly, I sing in silent harmony.
And a kiss of faraway piano. There's this constant back and forth in the track listing of Songs of Leonard Cohen. We go from Winter Lady back into unsettled Leonard with Stranger Song. His flamenco picking is even faster here, like a harsh, dry wind. It's dizzying, like the relationship dynamic he sings of. The narrator uses the image of the persecuted exile across like 11 verses to illustrate a man and woman circling each other endlessly, right person, wrong time, over and over and over again. This guy is never going to stick around, Leonard warns. He was just some Joseph looking for a manger. He's just looking for shelter on the way to his next place. And then leaning on your windowsill, he'll say one day you caused his will to weaken with your love and warmth and shelter. Put a pin in this one for later too. Sisters of Mercy's bells, whistles, accordion, and hurdy-gurdy remind me of the wacky instruments and sound effects used on Tim Buckley's Goodbye and Hello. I believe that album's production was also inspired by this record's, but I'll have to go into my notes and check. I know Blonde on Blonde for sure was an inspiration. The Sisters of Mercy were real, a pair of hitchhikers housed for a night in Edmonton. Quote, I invited them back to my little hotel room and there was a big double bed and they went to sleep in it immediately. They were exhausted by the storm and the cold, and I sat in this stuffed chair inside the window beside the Saskatchewan River, and while they were sleeping, I wrote the lyrics. And that never happened to me before. And if you, dear viewer, run into the same girls and they sweeten your night, that's cool. He won't be jealous. He did what he did out of the kindness of his own heart, not any other motivation. It makes sense that Leonard would have written these girls as nurses, nuns, or angels. He said Sisters of Mercy was the only song he ever wrote in one sitting, which is remarkable considering this guy wrote songs for like 60 years. It's miraculous. Like an angel coming to visit, or Leonard playing guardian angel to these girls led astray by their youthful chutzpah. If there's any song on the record that overdid it as far as Hammond and Simon's all sorts, unfortunately, it is So Long Marianne. When it works, it really works. It's the lonely guy at the bar remembering when his lover was in the stool beside him. The memories are warmer and more vibrant. The fiddle invokes that especially, but John overdid it by trying to shoehorn that stop time in where it just doesn't belong. Then Leonard overdid it by having Kaleidoscope throw the entire kitchen sink onto it. This So Long Marianne is like Dylan's Sad-Eyed Lady painted over in turquoise chalk. You can still hear hints of when this thing was called Come On Marianne. I forgot to put back on my rings after all this. I was cleaning earlier. It's time we began to laugh and cry and laugh about it all again. Those are the words of a man begging for her to come back and inviting her to experience the highs and lows of love again instead of saying goodbye. As are Come Over to the Window, My Little Darling. This is Leonard's soft Through What Light Yonder Window Breaks. It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. I'd like to try to read your palm. I used to think I was some gypsy boy before I let you take me home. He remembers how nomadic he was before he found home in his muse. The chorus says hello, but the verses say goodbye. Their constant on and off relationship. Why does he get cold feet? Well, you know that I love to live with you, but you make me forget so very much. I forget to pray for the angels, and then the angels forget to pray for us. Come over to the window, my little darling. Now is the windowsill in the Stranger song. The song in which Leonard uses an external narrator to call himself out for being a coward. Now he does it for himself. I never said that I was brave. Now here, on this song, Leonard accuses Marianne of causing his will to weaken with her love and warmth and shelter. Though he sees it's wrong and says so in this very song, he falls into this trap anyway. That was the never-ending cycle of Leonard and Marianne. Erica Pomeranz phrased it well. I think that Marianne probably put up with a lot to remain with him because he was moody and he had his own rules and needed his freedom. Hey, That's No Way to Say Goodbye is another song about having to leave Marianne, but instead of regretfully laying blame at her feet, he lays flowers. This is the most intimate song on Songs of Leonard Cohen. Nancy's wordless vocals through Leonard's verses of deep and warm kisses in the mornings and taking walks in the afternoon. It's tender. Listen to that second guitar part and how it bleeds right into the mouth harp. This is Kaleidoscope's other best moment on the record, weaving themselves into the song with ease. Speaking of weaving, remember the Loom of Smoke and Gold line from Winter Lady? Here's our answer to who Leonard was thinking of when he was with Joni. Your hair upon the pillow like a sleepy golden storm. Ding ding ding! It's Marianne! She is the other child of snow. She was Norwegian. Like he low-key referenced Romeo and Juliet in the last song, Leonard invokes more great, if unnamed, lovers. Many loved before us, I know that we are not new, in city and in forest, they smiled like me and you. She's always with him. My love goes with you as your love stays with me. It won't be effortless, but no matter where he goes, he can't ever break the bond they share. Let's not talk of love or chains or things we can't untie. Song of or songs of, oh my god, stories of. Whew, I was super wrong. I think it's safe to say that Stories of the Street is the weakest on this LP, which makes me feel bad because I have a friend who really likes it, mostly because it reminds us of Donovan, and he really likes Donovan, and I really like Donovan. Stories of the Street was written to the bohemian children of the 60s. It's timely and it's good. I think it's very difficult for Leonard to write a bad song, especially in this early stage of his career when he was just firing on all cylinders, but it simply cannot measure up to the all-timers it has to share a side with. I don't know. Something has to be my least favorite on the record. Not everything can be, stacked number one. I've seen Teachers thrown out as some people's least favorite, but I simply can't file it there. It features some of Leonard's best guitar playing ever. This might be his best urgent composition on Songs of Leonard Cohen. The lead guitar line is fabulous as well. Teachers is another biographical tune. He writes of all of his teachers, literal and otherwise, woman or man. I met a girl across the sea, her hair the gold that gold can be. Clearly Marianne back in Hydra, who taught him what true love is. Several girls embraced me, his many lovers, and then I was embraced by men, a nod to the homoeroticism of beautiful losers. In the end, he asks, "O teacher, are my lessons done? I cannot do another one." They laughed and said, "Well, child, are your lessons done?" Never. Not as long as you live. One of Us Cannot Be Wrong is the love song that shouldn't be a love song. I recognize this is purely from my own personal experience, because literally, how do I explain that this was once the soundtrack of me smoking a cigarette out my window while falling in love with a man who was drunk texting me from the bar? This is only a love song in my head. On paper, it's the bitter taste of rejection. The dogged pursuit of this woman, of who the hell she is, with really no closure. Nico's obsession with candles was written into the opening line, and the cold is written in throughout. Nico was branded as the Ice Queen. I took the dust from a long sleepless night and I put it in your little shoe. not unlike a cat bringing you a mouse. And I must confess that I tortured the dress that you wore for the world to look through. Little shoe and later mention of a honeymoon, but this wedding was all in Leonard's fantasies. He brings his broken heart to a doctor. He says he just has to quit. The favorite line on the whole album, by the way, that line. But it makes the doctor sick too. The saint who dare love the janitor of lunacy, is driven to madness himself, drowning himself in the pool, his ghost drooling around the lawn. Not even the Eskimo can keep himself warm. That's how inhospitable this woman is. And Leonard's about to freeze himself to death to be with her. You stand there so nice in your blizzard of ice. Won't you let me come into your storm? Leonard thought the recorder and him screaming in the distance was silly. I think it's brilliant. It's his broken heart crying out in agony. He's going mad. That's the way Songs of Leonard Cohen ends. An album that began with so much hope for love and salvation has degraded away into a man crying out into the ether with no response. Songs of Leonard Cohen is a solid first effort, and it establishes Leonard's strengths. His gruff voice, limited in range but boundless in passion, as are his words, his romantic guitar style and lyrics of romance, blood, daggers, and kisses. The poet places himself outside of his own self to bring the heady and heavenly down to earth. Dylan's discography is about manhood, right? For one reason or another, Leonard Cohen's discography resonates with women. The woman is the exotic, the other, who came from the man's rib. We have funny relationships with men, other women, love, God, ourselves. Leonard understood this. He was a ladies' man. This is why he could do what this album arguably does best: blend the feminine and the masculine. Songs of Leonard Cohen is the sweetness of the smell of tobacco. My personal favorites off this one are Suzanne, Master Song, Winter Lady, Sisters of Mercy, Hey That's No Way to Say Goodbye, and One of Us Cannot Be Wrong. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! With a completely different hairstyle, as I had to finish this video like a week later, that's Songs of Leonard Cohen. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Leonard Cohen? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love, and remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, and a new Dolls podcast every other Friday at noon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!